So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, based on your time, John. Welcome in Salesforce Epics Hour. My name is Amit Chaudhary. I am the founder and your co-host for today's session. And today we are going to talk about OmniOut. And we have two great speakers from the Salesforce team, Georgie and Alvin. So let me hand over them for their introduction and the presentation. Georgie, and even hand over to you.
Thanks, Amit. So good evening, everyone from Singapore. My name is Georgi, and we have Evelyn on the call as well from Vienna. We will be talking to you about OmniOut. You may have heard about Omni Studio, and OmniOut is one way to expose your OmniScripts off platform. So in today's session, we'll talk to you a bit about that. We are Salesforce employees, so please make your purchasing decisions based on what's in the product today, not what's on the roadmap. For some quick introduction, so my name is Georgi. I'm a senior program architect at Salesforce Industries, specifically aligned to Communications Cloud. My name is pronounced Georgi, not Georgie. It's with a soft G. I'm originally from Russia, so yeah, kind of a tricky name. I'm a certified technical architect, or CTA. I passed the review board last December. Here's a picture of me. After I passed, I printed out the certificate on like a 1 meter poster board and took a nice picture. I've been in Salesforce space for about 7 years. I started at a customer, then moved to an SI, then I joined an ISV, specifically Velocity, and through the Velocity acquisition, I'm part of Salesforce now for the last 4.5 years. I've been involved in 8 Communications Cloud implementations. I have quite a few certificates, 35 altogether. And then beyond my customer work, I'm also involved quite heavily in the community. I love doing sessions like this for Apex Hours. I also co-founded the Benelux CTA study group. Here's a picture of us about 2 or 3 years ago at one of our first sessions where Carl Brundage joined us remotely and we were able to meet in person. And then I founded the Moscow developer user group. Here's a picture of our first meeting like 2 years back. And I will hand it off to Evelyn to introduce himself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Evelyn Ivanov, and I'm industry cloud architect, now part of Shared Success Group in Salesforce. I live in Vienna for a couple of years now and really enjoy skiing in winter. My primary focus is the UI layer of Salesforce Industries and Salesforce Core, and I work across verticals. I have a background as a full stack application developer before I started working with Salesforce back in 2017. And I really enjoy working with anything related to Lightning Web Components, Lightning Web Runtime, Omni Studio, quite a lot of things outside of the Salesforce ecosystem as well. And thank you for having me today.
Yeah, and just some shameless promotion. Evelyn is probably like the expert or, top 3 experts in the company on OmniOut. So thank you for joining us today and sharing some insights.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go through the agenda. We'll talk about, before we can talk about OmniOut, I need to tell you a little bit about, Omni Studio, which OmniOut is a part of, and then Industry Cloud, which Omni Studio is a part of. We'll quickly recap OmniScript. We'll talk about LWC OSS, understand what that is, how it's related to OmniOut, then talk about OmniOut itself. We'll talk about some good use cases and not good use cases to use OmniOut. Evelyn will help us with doing the configuration and demo of taking an OmniScript and deploying it via OmniOut to Heroku, and then he'll walk us through some considerations, troubleshooting tips, and we'll finally go through some resources to learn more and close with a Q&A. So the objective here is, after this session, have a good understanding of what is OmniOut and be able to do at least a basic configuration by yourself for yourself or your customer. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll answer them at the end during the Q&A. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to ping us on LinkedIn afterwards as well. Okay, so a little bit about industry cloud. So I joined Salesforce through Velocity, through the acquisition about 2.5 years ago. What was formerly Velocity is now part of 6 industry clouds, the one circled up here. And then as of today, Omni Studio, which includes OmniOut, is available in these 6 industry clouds plus manufacturing cloud. That's GA as of today. So The focus for today will be Omni Studio, which is included in these 7 industry clouds. And then Salesforce Industries also includes some additional clouds as well. And then what exactly is industry cloud? So, we're talking about Omni Studio, we're talking about industry cloud, just to give you a sense of what's there. So industry cloud, here is the solution map for the communications cloud, which is what I'm focused on. And as part of this cloud, we have Omni Studio, which consists of the bottom things down here. So specifically OmniScript, Flex Cards, Data Raptors, Integration Procedures, and Industry DX. Today's focus will be on OmniScript and Flex Cards. There's a lot more involved as well. There's CPQ, order management. If you're interested in these things, we do have a couple other sessions that we've done with Apex Hours, so we'll link those in the resources. And there's also the industry data model, which is a big part of industry cloud. So just to give you a sense that when we talk about industry cloud, formerly known as Velocity, it involves a lot more than just Omni Studio, but Omni Studio is a very important part of it. So let's talk a little bit more about Omni Studio. Omni Studio consists of these 8 things, and today's focus will be specifically OmniScripts and Flex Cards. So to go into a little bit more detail about OmniScript, this is, you can think of this as kind of similar to a screen flow within Salesforce. So it's a way of walking the user through a guided process. This could be, let's say you're a telco, you want as part of the sales process, you want the customer to pick what kind of mobile phone they want to buy, then present them what kind of plans they can purchase, then present them some add-on services like Netflix, that sort of thing. And we want to do that as a multi-step process. And then maybe at the end, we do a credit check for the customer, we validate their address, something like that. This guided process can be done through an OmniScript. And then that OmniScript itself sits within Salesforce, and it's configured via drag and drop. You can also extend it with code if you like. And today's focus will be OmniOut, how you could take that OmniScript and deploy it outside of Salesforce, meaning outside of the Salesforce, Lightning experience on the desktop or laptop, Salesforce mobile, and communities. So this would be other use cases for third-party websites and mobile apps. So if you're interested more about, to learn more about OmniScript and Omni Studio, there's another session that will be linked to in the resources. We'll go through a deep dive there. Today's session kind of assumes that you are already familiar with OmniScript. So let's talk a little bit more about the pieces that make OmniOut possible. So the core thing is what's called Lightning Web Components Open Source, or LWC OSS. This is the open source flavor of LWC, and it's used for building LWCs that can be deployed outside of Salesforce, where those LWCs are not interacting with Salesforce data or functionality. So, it's not doing a SQL query to pull data from Salesforce or write data to Salesforce, that sort of thing. So the general idea is that you would be able to build a component and then deploy it either on platform or off platform with the same code. And then OmniOut is how you can take your OmniScript, which you develop and use on platform, and then you deploy that off platform. So maybe you can see where this is going. LWC OSS is how we make OmniOut technically possible. So basically OmniOut is the magic that, LWC OSS is the magic that makes it possible. And so when we talk about OmniScript, usually we're referring to OmniScripts deployed on the Lightning platforms. This would be, Lightning experience for your users using desktop or laptops. This could be the Salesforce mobile app. This could be Experience Cloud, or what was formerly Communities. All of that would be OmniScript. There's no need for OmniOut. OmniOut is specifically if you want to take that off platform, meaning into some channel that's not Salesforce. So like a third-party web server, a third-party mobile app that's not Communities, not Salesforce mobile. So the benefits are that you can use OmniScript to create a customer-facing guided process. This can be done without code. You can extend it with code as well if you like. This can be used in a variety of frameworks. It can be embedded inside of React, Angular, or other frameworks. Evelyn will talk a little bit more about that in a bit. These can be deployed to any CMS or web server. For example, Adobe Experience Manager is a popular one that's used in a few customers. It's optimized for performance, so it can be stored locally, for example, within the web server or mobile app, or it can be deployed to a CDN as well. And then you can use an API gateway to cache responses from Salesforce to improve performance further as well. You can also use an API proxy. This is recommended for better security. And the major benefit is that you create your OmniScript once and then you deploy it to multiple places. So rather than building your guided process once inside of Salesforce for your sales agents, and then a second time inside of your mobile app for your customers, you build it once, deploy it to both places, and your agents and customers are using the same process there. So from a development lifecycle point of view, here's how it works. So on the bottom here, we have Salesforce. Inside of Salesforce, we would have the OmniScript definition. The OmniScript itself could reference custom LWCs, flex cards, integration procedures, data raptors, that sort of thing. On platform, all of this will get compiled based on the OmniScript definition into a LWC itself, and then you can deploy that LWC on a Lightning record page, on a community, wherever you like. For OmniOut, it's a bit more, there are a bit more pieces involved. So for OmniOut, you need to consider your Devops or CI/CD tool. That will extract the OmniScript definition. It will also take the OmniOut dependencies that are on NPM, and then it will, that should deploy it to your third-party channels. So this could be Heroku or some web server. This could be a third-party mobile app. And so it will take all of this stuff and basically deploy it as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on your third-party mobile app or web server. But ultimately, the OmniScript itself is mastered in Salesforce. Everything is mastered in Salesforce, although you can tweak it a bit if you wanted for OmniOut. From a runtime perspective, here's how it works. So at runtime, in Salesforce, we would have all the things that the OmniScript is interacting with. This could be integration procedures, data raptors, calculation procedures, Apex classes, HTTP actions, whatever is involved in that OmniScript. And then at runtime, basically your web server or mobile app will have the web components that are generated by the OmniScript. It's recommended to go through Proxy, and then it will do an API call to Salesforce to actually invoke the integration procedure or Apex or whatever. It invokes that, gets the response back, and then otherwise behaves like the OmniScript would on platform. So you can think of it as the interactions to Salesforce are still happening there. It's happening through API calls, and it's recommended to go through a proxy for extra layer of security. And then some of you may have heard of a feature called Lightning Out. What we're talking about today is OmniOut. You might be thinking, okay, why are there two out features? What's the difference between them? I want to talk a little bit about that. So we'll start with OmniOut on the left-hand side. I'll kind of go point by point here. The important point is that OmniOut is generally available. It's been available as of the fall 20 release in Communications Cloud. Lightning Out is currently in beta. It's been in beta since spring 16. For OmniOut, the dependencies are locally available and they can be modified. So let's say your OmniScript that you have deployed on platform is great, but maybe you want to tweak some specific functionalities or the styling or something like that specifically for OmniOut, but not for your agents. OmniOut gives you the ability to do that, so you can tweak it when you take it off platform. Lightning Out, the dependencies are downloaded at runtime and you can't modify them like we can in OmniOut. OmniOut has native support for OmniScripts and flex cards. Lightning Out does not. OmniOut has native LWC support. Everything is related to LWCs. And Lightning Out, the support is native for Aura. and then LWC is supported by the Aura wrapper. In both cases, neither is really production ready from a authentication or connection point of view. You'll need to do some additional implementation work to get this production ready. In OmniOut, it's recommended to use a proxy, and you have an out-of-box option to use the proxy if you like. In Lightning Out, it's kind of making a direct connection to Salesforce. In both cases, we can use the guest user if we like, and then OmniOut has an out-of-box connector for AW or AEM, Adobe Experience Manager. Lightning Out does not. Okay, and in my opinion, the most complex piece is when would we leverage OmniOut and when would we not leverage OmniOut? You might be really excited to be like, okay, let's use this functionality, but when do we actually use it? Let's talk about that. I would say the most important thing is reusability. So good use cases to leverage OmniOut are where we have some kind of off-platform customer-facing channels. This could be a React Native app. This could be a third-party web server or CMS like AEM. Our OmniScripts that we want to use for both OmniOut and inside of Salesforce are the same or mostly the same in terms of the actual process itself, in terms of the styling, in terms of the functionality. Again, we can tweak this between the channels if we need. But if your OmniScript is 95% different between on-platform and off-platform, then you're not really getting benefit because you're only getting that 5% overlap. So reusability is the key benefit. And then from a DevOps perspective, the Salesforce team is going to be the one that's developing the OmniScript and implementing the OmniScript. So it introduces a dependency between your mobile channel and the mobile channel or the web server and Salesforce. So you need to be okay to have that dependency. If your web server or mobile app wants to be completely independent, then this isn't really a great use case. And finally, from a DevOps perspective as well, we need to incorporate the OmniOut deployment into the DevOps process for that channel. So to give an example of when this is a good fit, let's say a communication service provider or your favorite telco has an OmniScript. It's used for agents and end customers. They will purchase mobile services with a handset. The process is the same for both sets of users. So for agents, it's the same as for end customers. And then we can manage the governance dependencies and DevOps and so on. And the customer-facing version is a custom mobile app. So here is a perfect fit for OmniOut. We have that benefit of reuse, and we have a third-party mobile app, so OmniOut makes sense. To take the flip side of this, what is a good scenario not to use OmniOut? If you're using sites, aka Experience Cloud, which was formerly known as Communities, you don't need OmniOut. You can just directly use OmniScript. OmniOut doesn't give you any benefits. Just directly drag and drop the OmniScript in there. Same thing for Salesforce Mobile or Mobile Publisher. You can just directly use OmniScript, no need for OmniOut. And then if your OmniScripts are very different in terms of process, styling, functionality, if it's like 95% different between your different groups of users or channels or whatever, this is also not a good use case because you're not getting that reusability. If the other channel wants to work independently on the front end, again, not a good use case because this introduces a dependency on the Salesforce development team. And similarly, from the DevOps perspective, if we can't incorporate the OmniOut deployment into the DevOps for the other channel, it's not a good fit. So the example here is kind of similar. Let's say that we have an OmniScript that's used by agents and end customers. The business process is significantly different between the two. We have a third-party channel that's not using Communities, and they want the development to have minimal dependencies. These are different pieces that are not a good fit. So this is where you would consider, building a custom UI that's not leveraging OmniOut. So that's what I want to share in terms of theory. Hopefully you have a decent understanding of what OmniOut is, where we would use it, where we would not use it. Now Evelyn will take us through how to actually, hands-on configure it, how to take an OmniScript and deploy it via OmniOut. So Evelyn, I will stop sharing and
Actually, could you take us to the next slide?
Yes. Yeah, if you want to speak through this.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so before we jump into the demo, a couple of points. If you need to follow along with me, all the OmniOut dependencies that are coming from npm are in our private repository. So you need to get an authentication key from us in order to download this. You need to raise a case basically with us to get that key. You need to have an org, either a demo org or your client sandbox that has an industry cloud or core Omni Studio installed in order to leverage this OmniOut capability. We recommend that you start with some sample OmniScript when you're trying things out. In fact, there is a sample OmniScript inside the starter package. And once you get to know all the mechanics around it, you can switch to your actual implementation. You can deploy this anywhere, but for today's demo, we're going to use Heroku to deploy our application. And yeah, you can use any editor of choice, but make sure that you have the Heroku CLI if you plan to install on Heroku, Node.js as well. So let me share my screen.
Okay, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I have a demo org that has the core Omni Studio package installed, right? This is not a vertical package. And we have a very simple OmniScript with 2 steps. In the first step, we have a couple of standard elements from the OmniScript, some data raptor and HTTP action and some UI elements. And in the second step, we have a flex card that is being referenced using the custom LLC element of the OmniScript. So this is how it would look like in preview within the Salesforce org, right? And the second step is just 2 selectable items, and we've built that using FlexCard, right? So I can do a multi-type of select within my OmniScript. So this is what we use for today's demo. Before we jump into this, you need to set up your starter project or a boilerplate project that we give you. Where is that one? That is available inside the static resources of the Salesforce org. And if you look for Velocity OmniOut LWC, you'll be able to find that static resource. There are a couple of more resources available, which are a bit more advanced and showing different type of use cases. But the minimum amount of setup that you need to have is this one, Velocity OmniOut LWC. So you can download this one and extract it on your machine. Once you do that, you get a project that looks like this one. So just a couple of words what we have inside this application folder before we jump into the action. As Georgi was mentioning, we do have a support for Adobe Experience Manager. So the folder AEM UI apps is dedicated to Adobe Experience Manager. If you want to bundle your OmniScript for Adobe, all the components related to Adobe will be in this folder. We have a scripts folder which has our Webpack configuration. So we do use Webpack for module resolution and bundling of our application. Update CSS resources is again dedicated to Adobe. Server.js is a sample express server that we're going to use. You can use that locally or on your target environment. And custom labels.js is for fetching all the translations in case you use multi-language OmniScript, which is also supported of platform. Within the source folder, you're going to find out a couple more folders. One is modules, and modules will contain our OmniScript and any custom lightning web component that we might have. In fact, when you download the starter project, there is one example or sample OmniScript that you can already use. The velocity override folder has a kind of a map, which allows you to set up the different paths that are available on the Salesforce platform, and what do you want this map to correspond to outside of the Salesforce platform. So if you use a navigate action that might take you to a certain path on Salesforce, you can tell your OmniOut application that this path corresponds to a different kind of path on my local server. Then we have our Newport design system. We won't go into details into this, but it's our own, let's say, industry style sheet or look and feel for the OmniScript. And under velocity resources, you'll find some specific style sheet for the OmniScript and specific JavaScript resources for stuff like velocity PDF actions. Index HTML is our base or bootstrapping file, as well as the index.js. Inside the index.js, it is important to always import your OmniScript or the one that you want to reference. In the sample application, we're already importing the sample OmniScript here. So you basically have to do the same for each OmniScript that you want to use. You might notice that we're using synthetic shadow because this is something that is being used on platform and we heavily rely on it for now. So remember to always import synthetic shadow. There are a couple of commented out imports related to multi-language OmniScript if you want to set up some local information. There are two hooks to set up the specific paths for SLDS or Newport resources, and this is more for Adobe Experience Manager. There is an option to set up your OmniOut for guest user as well. And then finally, we come to the important part where we actually define the name or the custom tag name for our OmniScript. And this can be anything of your choice, right? It can be C-my OmniScript. You can name it anything you want. But to keep it consistent, we usually always start with velocity OmniScript as a prefix. And we have two more DocuSign related pages if you use the DocuSign actions of the OmniScript itself. As I said, you need to have an authentication key and set that either within Yarn RC or npm RC to download our resources. Client libconfig is again strictly related to Adobe Experience Manager, so we won't go into details into this one. The LWC services config is kind of a map of the resources that we want to take from our development build into the production build. So it will go into the dist folder. And the config JSON is the module resolution, basically. So you might see that all of our npm dependencies are referenced here, including the local ones from the modules folder. So if tomorrow you install additional dependency from another vendor, which provides Lightning Web Components, you have to define this under the modules section in order for the module resolution to work. In the package JSON, we have some Express and other dependencies that we need for the local server. But you might also see that we have all the dependencies for the OmniOut, right? So this is how our framework works outside of Salesforce. All of the dependencies are being made available through npm, so you can download these. In terms of commands, there are a few commands again dedicated to Adobe, but the important one is the build command, which can build your production dist folder, production ready webpack, and the serve one, which can actually serve the production build on your local server. And for a development server, you can use the npm run watch command. Okay, so I've already installed the dependencies. As I said, you can use yarn or npm. And you need to get that key, it will download this. So if you just run the watch command, this will start my localhost server. Okay, so this is the sample OmniScript that comes as part of the starter pack, right? And as you can see, it looks exactly the same like it would look like on the Salesforce platform, right? There's no difference in that. Now let's have a look at how we make our sample OmniScript available within the application. If you go to the OmniScript designer in the drop-down menu, you see an option to download off-platform Lightning Web Component. And this is the one that you need to go for. What will happen behind the scenes is that we will take the metadata that is on the platform and we'll do some modifications to it, mainly in terms of the imports. We're going to do all the imports from the C namespace and we'll add some additional code for the off-platform usage. But we'll do all of this in the background for you and download a zip folder for you. So what is inside that folder? It will have the similar folder structure as our starter project, but under modules, you'll see that we have Velocity OmniScript and my sample OmniScript is here. And we have another folder, the C folder. So all the custom components that you use or overrides of certain elements will be coming under the C folder. One important thing to remember is that if you have a second or third level and so on type of a dependency, you need to specify this in the configuration of the OmniScript. We won't pick up a second level dependency or third level dependency because there's no way for us to know that those exist. So it is up to you to do the mappings so we can pick this up as part of the export. You don't have to manually do this if you don't want to. So the IDX do have a command for OmniOut to download this, so you can include it in your pipeline. You don't have to manually go into the org each and every time to download the files. So let's copy these two and take them into our startup project. Okay. So I have deleted the sample OmniScript, right? That was there in the beginning, and I have included mine. And then we have our flex cards, basically, which is in the C folder. If you need to develop your own Lightning Web components, you can place them in the C folder. That's what we usually do. So you're not limited to using only what's coming out of the platform. You can also build your own Lightning Web components. Now the next step is to import our OmniScript. So I'm just going to remove this one. Sorry. And import this one. Okay, and I'm going to change the name here. And as I said, you can give any name that you want to it. And again, I'm going to start my server. Okay, so that looks good. And now we just need to update the name in the index.html correspond to the name that I have given. But this is the custom tag, right? So as you can see, we have our OmniScript up and running. But you might see that it's trying to do some calls, right, to log some usage interaction events. Also, all of our backend calls are not really working, right? And the reason for that is because we did not set up any connection for the OmniScript. So we need to go back into our application and look into the index.html file. In the starter project, we have, let's say, an example method that would set up the connection for the OmniScript. We are using the JS-Force library to provide the connectivity to Salesforce for the OmniScript. So you need to provide two parameters here, the access token and the instance URL of your Salesforce environment, or the one that you want to connect to. So let's set up the access token. And I've taken mine for Postman. And the second parameter is the instance URL of my Salesforce org. Okay. Okay. And third one, which is mandatory, is to set up the namespace of the package. As I'm using an Omni Studio org, for me to be Omni Studio. But if you have a vertical package, it would be velocity CMT or velocity ins or velocity public sector and so on. Right? But in my case, it's Omni Studio. So that's it. As you can see now, we don't have any more errors, and you can see that my HTTP requests are going out of the browser, right? I'm getting 200, okay? So I can fire my data raptor or my HTTP action and so on, and I'm getting all of my data back. Georgi was mentioning that we support a proxy URL, and that's the third parameter that the connection object supports. So you can set up a proxy URL parameter, which can be pointing either to a specific route on your server, the one that hosts the OmniOut, or it could be a completely independent server that only covers the connection to Salesforce. That's really up to the implementation team to decide. So we're not going to use that today, but we can share some documents on that piece as well. Maybe you're asking yourself, how does the OmniScript know about this connection? So in the sample function, we are adding an event listener for OmniOut component ready. The OmniScript will send an event whenever it is ready to receive the connection object, and we are just capturing that event within the index HTML and setting the connection, right? And this is a very simple example. You could also manually set the connection of the OmniScript through the attributes. So as you can see, we're referencing our OmniScript here, and one of the attributes is the run mode, right? I have set up my run mode to local script definition, which means start the OmniScript and don't make any check against the org. We are going to read the definition anyway from within the local folder, but we won't make any check against the org. Does this OmniScript exist, and does this OmniScript, is it active or not, right? If I remove this run mode attribute completely, it's going to make a check against the org. So that's really up to you. For performance reasons, we don't really want to check against the org each and every time because it's an additional API call. But it's really up to the implementation team. There are a couple of more attributes that you can pass, like the layout. And remember, we were talking about Newport design system, or the industry's look and feel. So you can set the layout as Newport in order to load the OmniScript in the Newport design system. You could also pass the record ID, which will correspond to the context ID inside the Salesforce org. Or you can also use the prefill attribute, which basically accepts an object. So this is a way for you to pass specific data nodes within the OmniScript itself. And finally, we have the connection one. As I said, you can set the connection yourself. Usually, if you embed the OmniScript into another web app, usually this is not the production way to set up the connection. Usually you wrap around your OmniScript either with an Angular or React component or so on, and then that one is responsible for pushing the connection. So you can use the connection attribute to set that one into the OmniScript. You don't have to rely on this event all the time. Okay. One thing also to remember is that all the CSS files that we are using are in the index HTML. So if you choose to use the Newport design system, you have to uncomment that import in the index and comment out the SLDS one. Out of the box, it's commented out. Okay. So now let's deploy our OmniScript into Heroku. I'm going to create a new app on Heroku. And I'll call it Omni Studio OmniOut. Okay, we need to initialize a new GitHub repository. Okay, I'm going to update my git ignore to also include the node modules and also the dist folder, because I don't want the production build to be pushed into Heroku. Also, we don't really need to push the Adobe stuff right now. The rest is fine. I can add my remote origin. So that looks fine. And we can check if we have our post build script for Heroku. Okay, so basically whenever Heroku finishes with the build, right, I want it to generate my production build, which will create the dist folder, and I want to start the server using the dist folder. One thing that I'm missing is the proc file, and I want to execute npm run serve when I'm on the web type. So that one will start my Node.js server. So this looks good. So we can try to push this. Okay, so it's doing the build for me on Heroku. And by the way, you're not bound to use the starter package. You can build your own app using pure Webpack config, right? It's just for you to kickstart your development and to see the mechanics behind some of these packages. Okay, so my build is ready. So let's try to open the app. And you can see that our app is up and running on Heroku. I have added the Heroku URL to course settings. That's why you don't see any course errors. That's why all the HTTP requests are going through, right? They are successful. Okay. Right. Yeah, this was the demo piece. We wanted to show you how quickly you can basically take the same process on platform and deploy it somewhere else off platform. There is a lot more materials that we'll share with you later on for a bit more details around this. I will switch now back into our presentation. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the limitations or something that you need to consider when using OmniOut. Everything that we discussed so far only applies to LWC version of OmniScript, right? If we have somebody from the audience that is still using the AngularJS type of products within the industry build, this does not apply to those. The custom LWCs, as I already said, they need to be explicitly mapped into the OmniScript. And this is valid for second level, third level dependencies, and so on. If it's just a standard component override, you don't have to do anything. We will pick it up for you. Not all components are available off platform. Some of the Lightning prefix components or Lightning based components are not available. They simply have not been open sourced yet. So we do suggest that you check on GitHub which ones are available. In fact, in the script document, you can find a link to those that are available. Also, you can find a link of all the velocity-based components that are available. The same rule applies there. Not all of them are open sourced for multiple reasons. These are the two components that Lightning Input and Lightning Combo Box, we see people very often use them inside their custom components, and then they get some errors because these are not open sourced. And when I say that they're not open source, they're not part of the OmniOut package, right? You might find another package, another NPM package that supports those, like the Lightning-based components, which are in alpha state, I think. But they are not included in the OmniOut package, right? So you have to additionally install these if you want to use the Lightning input, for example. But from the core package, these two are not supported, plus a few others which you can find. There are some which the industries team has come up with as a replacement, let's say, like the Lightning map or Lightning file upload, which is the industry's interpretation of those components for off-platform. Be mindful with the static resources. Either get your files locally available within your web server, reference them through URL that would work in the OmniOut environment, or simply serve your resources from a CDN. We did mention the synthetic shadow DOM quickly. As you know, this is a polyfill that we load in order to support older browsers or browsers that don't understand the native shadow DOM yet. It comes with some consequences like CSS leakage. So when you import the synthetic shadow, the CSS file will leak across the entire page. So be sure that you use the scope version of Newport or SLDS, basically scope your CSS file so it doesn't interfere with other elements on the page. And if you embed this into another app, make sure that that other app does the same thing so it doesn't leak any CSS within the embedded LWC. There might be something on the roadmap for this to address this, but it's in the works. The save for later functionality works fine outside of Salesforce as well. So you can persist your flow off platform, resume it on platform, but your DevOps process needs to export the OmniScript or download the off platform OmniScript against each org. And the reason for that is because when we persist the record, we rely on the ID, and we cannot use cross org IDs for this. So we need the ID that actually exists against the target org. And finally, the OmniScript definition is always locally available. There is no way for us to download this at runtime. In fact, when you download your Lightning Web Component, you see that the definition is just a JavaScript file that is available locally. The only thing you can do is do a check against the org. Is this OmniScript there and is it active? But we cannot download the definition at runtime. And we've done this on purpose for performance reasons. We don't want to do that. Another good thing is that we are framework agnostic, which means that you can embed your OmniOut or LWC component within any framework of your choice. We do have some samples for people interested in that. The samples cover Angular and React, I think. We did not add view yet, but basically it would work fine. You can communicate within the framework. So there are no limitations on that side. You might find basically two ways to inject the OmniOut into your web app, your existing framework. One is to consume the already production bundled files, basically load those as a resource. Or another option, which some of the customers have chosen to do, is to come up with a common Webpack configuration that can bundle together either React, Angular, and so on together with the LWC components. In this link here, you can find some sample repositories that are using Webpack to generate React plus LWC, Angular plus LWC. About the authentication, we did see a very simple setup of setting up the access token for my user and the instance URL to connect to the org. But this is usually the part of the implementation that takes the most amount of time, and it needs a serious thought of how you can set that up. Basically, all the calls that you have within the OmniScript, data raptors, integration procedures that will go to Apex REST, right? So you need to connect to Salesforce, and you can do that via any OAuth setup available. We highly recommend that you leverage the proxy option, as without a proxy, this is really an insecure type of connection. Anybody can pick up the token and make numerous calls against your Salesforce org. So leverage the proxy, let the proxy make the connection to Salesforce, enforce some IP restrictions, and also additionally, I would recommend that you define a list of APIs that the proxy is allowed to invoke. Don't open it up to any API that Salesforce supports. If your OmniScript needs to run in unauthenticated type of journeys, you can either set up the guest user for that or run in integration user mode. That would depend on what objects you need to access, what limitations the guest user enforces against the journey that you want to have. If your OmniScript will be available for authenticated customers, like basically a partner or a customer facing directly, you can use the Experience Cloud user licenses, customer plus, partner user. You can obtain a token for them basically and connect to Salesforce. Governance limits you have to consider as well. Basically, every call that we make outside of the OmniOut will count against your limit. We do recommend that you find your total API call per 24-hour limits and see basically your edge cases. What is your average or what is your maximum number of API calls that you can go through? So that you're not surprised that you have hit the limit. Try to leverage the integration procedures as much as possible to bundle server-side calls together in order to reduce the round trips against the Salesforce server. And we also leverage your ESB or caching layer or cache whatever you can cache in order to reduce the direct call to Salesforce. Regarding performance, OmniOut should perform the same as on the platform. In fact, it should be actually faster because there is no lightning locker restriction outside of Salesforce. If you see a poor performing OmniScript outside of the platform, it's probably poor performing on the platform as well. So you should follow the best practices when building your OmniScripts. As I said, reduce the round trips to the server, group multiple actions together as much as possible. You should test and optimize the overhead of the proxy. How much overhead is it actually adding to all the HTTP requests? Be mindful of the custom components. Don't go, if you feel like that you need to build hundreds of custom components for a single journey, then something is going wrong, right? You shouldn't have that many custom components. Then you're losing the value of the product basically. Consider using CDN wherever that's possible. You can also load the entire LWC from CDN. You don't have to really rely on your web server to do that. The Devops process is very important, and as I said, you can use the industry DX, formerly known as the Velocity build tools, to download the off-platform LWC. You can set that up within your local application folder, so you can just run a command and we'll download it for you and we'll place it in the correct folder for you. So you don't have to go into the org each and every time to download your Lightning Web component. And we also recommend that you maintain the off-platform version of the OmniScript separately, or at least in a different set of folders compared to your standard metadata. Some troubleshooting tips or things that we have seen from the field. We often get the question that people are unable to authenticate to download the resources from the static resource. As I said, set up your authentication key within the npm-rc or yarn-rc with the key that we'll provide to you for the Salesforce support. It might be that that key is getting invalidated or revoked for some reason. If that's the case, just open another case with us and we will generate a new key for you. You might have to log in explicitly to the Nexus repository from your command line. So that's also something that you can give it a try. Do an explicit npm login with the credentials that we give you. But if you cover all of these cases, you should be good to do the installation. Also, when you apply a patch in your org and you download the resource, you might get an error that you are trying to get a version of the package that doesn't exist. So always try to match the major package version. Just like in the example here, you might be on Winter 22 March patch, so 234.4. You can try to target the major version 234, which would be 444 in the package JSON, right? So the minor versions are not always available within the Nexus repository because we don't really make changes all the time to those. So always target the major release if you get such an error that there is no such version available. Course is something that you hit 100% the first time you set it up. Whitelist localhost 4002. This is the default port that we use. As well as any other URL like the Heroku URL that we used in the example, in order to allow the codes to go through the browser directly. If you use a proxy server, you don't have to do that because that would be server-to-server communication. Yeah, you can do some local tests as well, just to confirm that that would work fine. Other issues, use the dev tools, right? Use the console tab for any errors that you might see, any module resolution is failing or so on. Just do a bit of investigation of what's happening in the browser before raising the case. Maybe it's something simple that you have missed to do, but the browser should give you all the answers in case you're facing any issues. Georgi, you want to take next?
Yes. Okay. So thanks a lot, Evelyn, for going through those details. This is pretty much the end. We just wanted to link to a few enablement resources in case you want to learn more. So related to OmniOut, there is a Trailhead module where it will go over kind of similar content that we went through today. You can check out the link there. On the Velocity Success community, there's an extensive OmniOut section with sample OmniScripts and a sample project. You can check that out. If you're interested in learning more about LWC OSS, those are the links there. If you're interested in getting certified, there are two Omni Studio certificates. There's Omni Studio Developer and Consultant. The links are there. And then we have a couple Apex Hour sessions that were done on just general intro to Omni Studio and Omni Studio development best practices. I'll throw the links in the chat, and the slides will be shared afterwards as well. And a lot of the documentation is still on the Velocity Success community. If you don't have access, you can request access via this link. Just send a request using your work email. If you're a Salesforce partner or customer, it'll get approved and you'll be able to access that. It's free of charge. Next slide, please. Okay, and then if you're interested in learning more about industry cloud outside of Omni Studio, we have a couple sessions that were also done with Apex Hours. I did a session on industry CPQ developer, and my colleague Mehboob did a session on order management. Check those out. And then for all of the other Velocity topics like order management, insurance, the certificates for those are available on Velocity University and Velocity Web Assessor. And then stay tuned. I believe they will be eventually migrated to Trailhead. So that was what we wanted to cover today. I do see a few questions in the chat, and I've been answering some of them. But I will read them off, Evelyn. I'll probably need your help here. So there was one question from Manshikanti. Where can we, like, how can we embed static resources into OmniOut?
Yeah, so there are a couple of options. Either you take that resource off platform, like you put it within your local server, or you reference it, directly from the Salesforce URL, or load it through a CDN, right? You can upload it into CDN. That would work both on and off platform.
Cool. Then there is a question from Sneha. Basically, how do the HTTP actions work if we're running it locally?
Yeah, it's just standard HTTP request. We use the JSForce connection, the JSForce library to do all the REST calls.
Cool. There's a question from John. Thoughts on embedding OmniOut inside of a chat channel like WhatsApp? This is quite an interesting one. I honestly don't know. Does WhatsApp have like the ability to put a UI inside of it, like a web page or something?
I'm not sure about that one. Might have to check on that.
A question from Anand. Can we refer custom CSS inside of the index.html?
Yeah. Yeah, you can place any type of CSS that you want within the OmniOut app. I mean, if you use the Newport design system and come up with your own, corporate identity look and feel, or your own design, you can again download it and place it within the OmniOut app. That would work fine. In fact, if you load it anywhere within the app, it will work because of the synthetic shadow. It will leak the styles everywhere.
Okay, there was a comment from John saying this looks complex. Do customers hire consultants with this? I would say generally customers will work with their SI and or Salesforce CSG team to help implement this. Evelyn, question for you. Can we integrate OmniOut with Google Analytics?
Off platform, no, it's not there yet. On platform, we have Google Analytics tracking. The hooks are there in OmniOut. We have customers that have extended the functionality to support that, but out of the box, we don't support that yet. There is only internal type of tracking that you can do against the Salesforce records, the Salesforce objects. But yeah, the Google Analytics is not there yet for our platform. Okay.
And there were a few questions related to licensing. So just in general, Omni Studio is available in the former Velocity industry clouds, and I believe it's also available as an add-on for manufacturing cloud and I think financial services cloud. Someone commented that it's available as an add-on for service cloud, but I'm not personally 100% sure on that. But for any licensing topics, please discuss this with your account executive or your sales team. And then there was a comment from John, which SIs have the most experience. I can't really comment on that. You can work with your SI partners to understand that. Is there a reference implementation? In the docs that are available on Velocity Success, there is a sample project that you can use and deploy. Okay, a few more questions. Do we need to host that CSS on the web server? Basically, yes. Does the OmniScript version, should the OmniScript version be active while running OmniOut on the external app?
No, if you set that run mode to local script definition, we won't check if it's active or not.
Okay. And then a question from Sachin, how does it handle custom LWCs referencing Apex dependencies, or it doesn't?
You have to use our utilities, and then we can do that. Like we have utilities to invoke an Apex class, and that one would work fine. But if you do a direct Apex class import in the LWC, that would not work. So you have to use the get data handler, for example, utility to invoke an Apex class.
Cool. So I think that was all of the questions from the chat. If there are any more questions, feel free to jump off mute and just ask.
I guess we cover pretty much all the questions. So thank you so much, Georgie and Evelyn, like for such a great session. And if anybody still have any question, feel free to post. I just see one question. Is any information exposed to the conditional view logic?
Do you mean?
I'm not sure what is that. Maybe a bit more details on that.
Yeah, Sean, could you clarify that? Do you mean like if you have a conditional element or conditional step?
It works in the exact same way that it works on platform.
Yeah, like in OmniScript itself, you can have like a step be conditional where you can show or hide the step based on certain logic, or specific elements like fields be shown or hidden. It would behave the same in OmniOut. There's nothing unique you need to, nothing special you need to do for that.
Just be mindful that the conditional views are browser based, right?
Okay, thank you, Georgie, and then for such a great session, and thank you so much everyone for the joining, who all joined a little bit late or who want to watch this session again. The recording will be available on Apex Hour YouTube channel, so don't forget to subscribe to get the notification so that you will be get notified whenever the session will be available. Thank you everyone for the joining, and thank you, Georgie and Edwin, for spending your weekend with us and sharing your knowledge with our community. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah, and just before we close really quick, hope this was a useful session for everyone. You know, feel free to ping us on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions. And I will be at Trailhead DX if anyone, or sorry, Trailblazer DX if anyone is interested in meeting up in person. Just ping me. Would love to grab a coffee. But yeah, hope that was useful for everyone, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.